Hi, Eddie. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thanks for joining.
Oh, thanks for having me. Did we ever determine who's going to be the primary and alternate?
Uh, between, yeah, you're talking about like
Wade?
between you and Wade.
Yes.
I don't know if I ever saw between the two of you who is going to be primary and alternate. From our standpoint, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
We're just trying our best to keep each meeting down to a more manageable size. We've got a few organizations that have representation categories that have a primary and an alternate, and maybe like multiple alternates. So,
Okay.
we'll if both of you are on the call today, that's no problem at all.
Okay.
And if you want to divide and conquer for future meetings, that would be great.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Understood. Thank you.
Yeah. But definitely appreciate your perspectives. So I want to make sure those are heard and available to us. Good afternoon, folks that are joining. We'll give everybody another couple minutes to get logged in before we start. Good afternoon, folks. We are right at about 1:30. We'll give everyone another minute or two to get in here. But in the meantime, if you want to put in the chat, just kind of as like a little interesting icebreaker tidbit about yourselves, your favorite thing to do in Oregon in the wintertime. Can start. Eddie, it sounds like you coach basketball. Do you coach youth? Do you coach what
I coach
level?
Lincoln High School.
Oh, great.
From the varsity coach Lincoln High School. Yeah.
Getting some good stuff here. Watch the rain and eat fondue. I like both of those things. Those are good. All right, well, I think we're probably at critical mass here. So thanks, folks, for sharing that a little bit about your favorite thing to do in Oregon in the winter. Anyone hasn't put it in, feel free to go ahead and do it. But We can go ahead and get started. So I'll pull up, I'm going to share my screen as we kind of get going along here. And we can go from there. So the agenda today, I kind of moved a few things around, but we'll start off with introductions. I'll give just a quick overview of the bill that formed building performance standards in Oregon. We'll talk about a draft charter that we put together. Hopefully everyone has had a chance to review it. We're not going to review it line by line in the meeting today, but I will ask for folks to go and review afterwards, a little bit of homework over the next week and a half or so to review that and just make sure there's nothing in there that you disagree with, or if there's anything you want to change, please let us know. We'll talk a little about our proposed rule structure, the way that we are proposing to schedule the rules themselves, and then the schedule, how often we meet as a RAC, kind of get general head nod consensus around the plan for that, along with our procedures, and then we'll talk about next steps for the RAC as we proceed about our work through the rest of the year. So I think first we'll just go ahead and do some introductions, because I know that I myself probably only know about half of the folks on the RAC. So super grateful and thankful for everybody who raised their hand wanting to be involved. I think it's great to have all these perspectives, and we look forward to working with everybody. But I'm gonna, I guess I'll just start on my screen. And if you want, when your name gets called, just introduce yourself, your organization, and kind of the who you represent and the perspectives you represent, and why you wanted to be part of this rulemaking advisory committee. So I'll start at the top left of my screen. Alex Potzel.
Hey, yeah. Good morning, or good afternoon, everyone. Alex Birdsell. I'm head of residential innovations with Earth Advantage. So people might be familiar with Earth Advantage. We're a nonprofit working in the residential sector and commercial, and we're interested in energy efficiency measures, of course. I'm also playing a role. I played a role in my previous position in the Resilient and Efficient Task Force that in 2022 convened, and basically the legislation leading to the building performance standards was a recommendation coming out of that committee, the task force. And then also we're the lead on a DOE grant together with Odo and other partners in supporting the development of the building performance standard in Oregon.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Eddie with Forest Grove.
Yes, so Eddie Littlefield, Power Services Manager from the City of Forest Grove. We're a municipality. We have our own power company here in the city, and some of the perspectives that we look towards is one of the things I manage, and the many things I manage, is our conservation programs. We work with commercial, residential, and industrial customers on how to shape load, try to conserve, try to help us, because we're a not-for-profit municipality. So the more we can save, the more that we can pass on, and we're not having to buy power in different tiers. It's all about purchasing for us. And so not only that, but we want to see what we can do to help our customers become more efficient. So that's kind of the perspective that we're looking at in this. And we play a lot of our funding. It's baked into our rates. So we're returning those funds back to our customers via conservation.
Yeah, thanks, Eddie. Wendy Simons.
Thanks, Blake, and thanks again, everybody, also from Odo for participating. We really appreciate it. My name is Wendy Simons. I am a rulemaking coordinator. I have worked with Blake on a few other rulemakings in the past, so I look forward to supporting this group and Blake in drafting the rules, and also I will be doing a lot of the formal rulemaking process on the back end, which is that will come up a little bit in some of our agenda, kind of filing with the Secretary of State and making sure that we fulfill every requirement that we need to in the formal state rulemaking process.
Yeah, thanks, Wendy. Next, Anahi. And I apologize if I pronounce that incorrectly.
Thank you. Hi everyone, my name is Anaís Segovia Rodriguez. I use she, her, ella pronouns. I am from Verde, and I am here for the advocacy side of things. I'm the Energy Justice Coordinator, but I am pleased to meet you all.
Thanks. Ben Burnett.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ben Burnett with PAE Consulting Engineers. So we're a full-service MEP design firm. I'm a mechanical engineer working in our regenerative design department, which does everything from, kind of standard building sustainability and design through microgrids and grid decarbonization, resiliency, and anything along those lines.
Thanks, Ben. Next up is Josie Cardwell.
Hello, my name is Josie. I'm with the Department of Administrative Services. I'm the energy analyst here. I work heavily with facilities. I'm here to represent building owners as well as just preparing to lead the state to satisfy our requirements.
Thanks, Josie. Cara Soller.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Okay, great. Kara Saylor, I'm the director and staff attorney at the Green Energy Institute at Lewis and Clark Law School. We are a climate policy and energy law organization housed in the Environmental Natural Resources and Energy Law program here. I bring to this process a lot of curiosity and desire to assist decarbonization efforts from our buildings, and also bring some hopefully local government perspectives. We work with a lot of local governments interested in climate action. Thanks so much.
Thanks. Clark.
Like you cut out. I don't know.
Oh, I did. Clark Brockman, if you're, yeah, thanks. Clark, you are on mute. At least it's showing mute for me.
There we go. How's that?
Yep, that's great.
Okay, sorry about that.
Yeah.
Clark Brockman. And my company is Brockman Climate Strategies, but it's brand new. I was at Sarah Architects for over 20 years, doing work in Oregon and in California. Passionate about decarbonizing buildings, but I also have lots of perspective of working with clients for 40 years. And want to keep their perspectives in mind as well. I'm also on the Zero Coalition group, and nationally I work with the American Institute of Architects Policy and Advocacy Committee.
Right.
Excited
Thanks,
to be
Clark.
on the group. Yep.
Thanks. Kevin Duell.
Yeah, hi, this is Kevin with Northwest Natural, and I'm focused on codes and standards, emerging technologies, and multifamily housing specifically in my job, and also very passionate about buildings and energy efficiency. And I'm really eager to see us tap the incredible resource that existing buildings are. There's just an enormous amount of energy savings to be had there, more than any other building facet I can think of. So I'm pretty excited to see this kind of approach for dealing with that existing energy situation.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Next, JP Crow.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I'm JP. I am representing BOMA, which is Building Owners and Managers Association for Oregon. I work for a company called Unico Properties, which is one of the bigger landlords, commercial landlords downtown Portland. And I work in the sustainability department. So I have a lot of experience, running decarbonization projects and trying to get energy efficiency projects implemented, working with asset managers, which all in all, I feel it's an important perspective to add to the conversation.
Thanks. Kathleen Buckeyett.
Everyone, Kathleen Buckeyett, Energy Trust of Oregon, and I manage our operations and maintenance and behavioral offerings. It includes strategic energy management for our commercial customers. So my focus will be on programs that we may want to design or how we can support building owners in this process.
Yeah, thanks, Kathleen. Next up, Vin Mason.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Vin Mason with the City of Portland, Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, and I lead our building decarbonization work to meet the city's climate action plan goals. Here because I worked in the original policy for the City of Portland on commercial energy benchmarking in 2015 and continue to oversee that program, as well as our home energy scoring program and the development of multifamily energy reporting policy as well. In addition to that, in the last several years, I've worked on a policy proposal for building performance standards. It's broader than just energy and carbon. It also includes health standards and resilience and temperature standards based on the feedback we received from communities of color in Portland, and thinking about benefits to low-income residents. And so there's a lot of stakeholder engagement that happened for the development of those standards in 2022. And I think everybody who has spoken so far was part of that process. So it's great to see you all again. That process went on hold, though, with the passage of HB 3409. And so we want to assure alignment with the state and have a seamless process, especially from the property owner end of having to comply with two sets of policies. So the City of Portland process on hold until administrative rulemaking is done at the state level. So I'm happy here to represent for the city and align with the state and continue working with you all.
Great, thanks, Ben. Abby Reeser with Odo. I don't know if Abby's.
Yes, sorry.
There she
I
is.
couldn't
Yeah.
find my cursor. But I'm Abby Reeser with the Department of Energy. I'm the division assistant with the Planning and Innovation Division. So you all got the meeting request from me. So I'm here a lot with just kind of the administrative support, putting through these meetings and doodle polls and things like that.
Thanks, Abby. Rick Becker.
Good afternoon. Rick Becker, I'm with McKinstry. We do everything from MEP engineering, energy efficiency, facility condition assessments, pretty much within every market segment: municipalities, universities, schools, hospitals, data centers. And I think one of the reasons that I want to be part of this team is that we have a plethora of experience with very similar programs in Washington, Colorado, whether it's Seattle benchmarking, VPS, SBTU. And I think we can bring a lot of value to the team just by knowing what challenges we've had to go through working with both Washington and the Colorado programs.
Great, thanks, Rick. Next up is Rick Hodges.
Good afternoon, Rick Hodges with Portland General Electric. They're a large utility in the state, providing a lot of electricity to a lot of commercial customers. I have a background in energy efficiency and working on flexible load. I've engaged with the City of Portland's benchmarking in Washington as well. And currently looking at building decarbonization and grid interactivity to see how that all comes in play here. Thanks.
Thanks. Next is Zach Bradkovich.
Hey, thank you. I'm Zach Bradkovich, the account executive for Johnson Controls. Our mission is, as a global leader, is smart, healthy, and sustainable buildings, and this kind of meets that. I'm responsible for all the HVAC controls and equipment side for my customers. So I just want to help be a part of the process and then help my customers understand how to upgrade and be of value.
Thanks. And I think we'll round it out with a couple Odo folks that are also on the line. Christy Split.
Hi there. Nice to see everybody today. Christy Split, I'm our government relations coordinator and also just general helper outer on all things new bill implementation. I'll look forward to listening to your in-depth, wonky conversations on all this stuff, especially given all the great experience I'm hearing in the room. Thanks.
Thanks, Christy. And Alan Zelinka.
Hi, Alan Zelinka, Assistant Director for Planning Innovation, the Codes and Standards section that Blake manages is fits within my division, and following on Christy's lead, I'm a helper outer on almost everything.
Thanks, Alan. Is there anybody that I missed going through the list? Hopefully I didn't miss anybody, called it everybody. So great. I realized I didn't really give an introduction for myself. I'm Blake Shalide. I'm the manager of our Codes and Standards section at Odo. We do a lot with energy code development, energy efficiency standards, and the building performance standards program will be under this section too. So looking forward to working closely with everyone on this committee over the next few months. So the next thing on the agenda is I'll just give a quick 5-minute review of the building performance standards and the like what was in the bill, the general framework and structure for BPS in Oregon. So I'll kind of get it up on my screen here, make sure I can still see everybody. There we go. So
Hey,
as
Blake,
you all know,
a question,
yeah,
will the slides be available?
They are, yeah. So I forgot to mention it. So we have the SharePoint site that everybody should have access to. I dropped before the meeting and I emailed out to the agenda and the draft charter for the Rulemaking Advisory Committee. And then just before the meeting, I posted these slides up on that SharePoint site, along with, I'll pull up later in the meeting today, a draft schedule, and that's all up on the SharePoint site too. So, but please let us know if you're not able to access it. And that's the site that we plan to use for all RAC collaboration, commenting, review. So hopefully everybody's able to get to it and access it. So as we all know, in 2023, House Bill 3409 was passed. It included a number of different energy and climate related policies. One of them was building performance standards for Oregon to address energy use in commercial buildings, which accounts for about 20% of Oregon's total energy use. In general, it's going to require many large commercial buildings to enhance their energy management practices and potentially implement energy efficiency measures if they're not meeting a certain performance target that's based on site energy use. And it's an EUI, energy use intensity per square foot. And again, it's based on site weather normalized energy use, and it'll be modeled after ASHRAE Standard 100. There was a new version of Standard 100 that was just published about a month ago. And I also dropped a version of that standard onto the SharePoint site too. So everybody should have access to that. We have a licensing agreement with ASHRAE where we're able to take their standard, use it, and modify it for Oregon's use. If you're familiar with the way that Washington State approached their process too, they did something similar where they basically took the standard, created a state-specific version of it. That's our plan too. So that standard's available for your review now, but as we go through the process, we're going to be taking the language in that standard and modifying it, and that'll essentially become our state administrative rules. So the BPS program is administered by Odo, and the language in the statute and now in ORS is very similar to what was passed in Washington, modeled closely after that program. As far as the building thresholds go, they've defined these tier 1 and tier 2 buildings. Tier 1 buildings are all commercial buildings, non-residential hotels and motels that are over 35,000 square feet. And depending on their size, will determine when their compliance date hits. The largest buildings start in 2028, then phasing down to slightly smaller in 2029, and then ultimately anything 35,000 square feet and above by 2030. There's also this definition for tier 2 buildings, which includes certain sectors of buildings, multifamily residential, hospitals, schools, dormitories, and university buildings over 35,000 square feet. And then also general commercial hotels and motels between 20 and 35,000 square feet. And the difference between the main functional difference between a tier 1 and a tier 2 building is that tier 1 buildings will be required to meet a building performance standard, to meet that energy target, the performance target, where tier 2 buildings will just be required to benchmark and report their energy usage. We have a directive to evaluate a potential building performance standards for these tier 2 buildings in a few years, but the initial step is to gather data to benchmark tier 2 to inform future policy. So are there any general questions on PDPS in general in the state, any of these state specific thresholds or targets at this point? Happy to answer if there are any. I'm not seeing any. And as we go along today, feel free to raise your hand if you've got some. Yeah, go ahead, Ben.
Oh, yeah, thank you. A question for this rulemaking committee currently, is it just for tier 1 buildings, or are we also working on administrative rulemaking for tier 2 benchmarking?
So we do have to write the rules for tier 2 benchmarking by the end of the year. That's all part of the same process. The statute directs us to also establish a tier 2 rulemaking advisory committee, but it doesn't ask us to do that until next year, really. So we are planning to kind of develop a focused tier 2 group this year too. The main function of this committee is tier 1, but it'll also include some of the tier 2 components also. So if that kind of answers the question. But we started to think about what that tier 2 building, the tier 2 committee looks like, and we plan to issue kind of a call for representatives on that one too soon. But yeah, the main function for this one will be tier 1. But certainly if there are any tier 2 related comments that this committee has, we would love to hear them. So I put up the next item on the agenda is the draft charter review. I posted a charter that that we drafted for this committee to kind of help guide our work as we go along. And I was actually going to pull that up now. And I'm not going to go through each line of the charter, but I did want to just highlight a few specific areas just for the rulemaking committee's knowledge, and just to kind of highlight these as areas that we're kind of looking for feedback to make sure that you're aware. And hopefully we can kind of come to just a general consensus on the charter just to help us guide our work as we go along. And we can always refer back to it if we need to. But in general, the main purpose of the RAC is to provide consultation to us, to Odo, as we go through our rules, recognizing that in its in its nature, the RAC is an advisory and a consultative committee. There's not necessarily a consensus among committee members that's necessary for us to do business, for us to proceed with our with our work, not a quorum or any sort of like Robert's Rules of Order structure to the RAC. While we'll certainly try our best to achieve consensus on all the language that's there, but we recognize that there may be some areas where there's just differing opinions on some of the topics, and we may take informal surveys or straw polls to kind of gauge where the RAC is sitting on a certain issue. But just as a note that the RAC is advisory and consultative in nature, and the ultimate authority is with Odo for rulemaking. But the committee's discussions will definitely be used to inform our draft rules, which are then going to go out for public comment as part of the process. And we'll go over the general framework for our proposed schedule later on today. One thing that we're just really encouraging and recommending as we go through our work, just because the RAC is, I think we're at about 15 members now, just to keep our meetings at a manageable size and ensure equitable representation from all of the appropriate perspectives. We're requesting that any sort of representatives with primary and alternate members, please send one representative from each kind of category and classification to each meeting, just to help us make sure that we're running meetings effectively and efficiently. But certainly feel free to, if you're not able to make a meeting, to designate an alternate who can attend in your place. That's great, and that's encouraged too. One of the primary duties of a RAC in rulemaking is to evaluate the fiscal impact of the rules, and specifically, and this is straight from the statute that defines rulemaking advisory committees in general, the extent of that impact will be and whether the rule will have a significant adverse impact on small businesses. So this will be one of the deliverables that Odo and the committee will need to have at the end of this process as we file our rules with the Secretary of State. And Wendy, I don't know if you want to add anything there. And I think in the meantime, I'll call on Kara. Looks like Kara has a question.
Yeah, thanks, Blake. Just right above that, you have the list of RAC members. Just wondered if it seems like there's maybe some different representatives here than maybe were initially announced. And so just wondering if you could flag maybe who's changed. And also, I know at one point you were looking for additional representatives. Are you now that you have everybody that you would want represented here?
Yeah, great questions. So first, I think all of these are the same as we initially sent out. I don't know if anybody, I'm going through the list, if any have changed. The one area that we were kind of still working on with we had a group of, we were encouraged that we had a group of integrated service providers, energy service companies that had proposed to be on the RAC between 3 different firms, which was great. And I know we're working with Honeywell, JCI, and McKinstry to kind of figure out who's the primary there. So I think that's maybe where there's some names, and we have 2 of those folks on the line today. So which is great. But we'll just again encourage folks to designate a primary and a secondary or an alternate, just to ensure complete coverage and keep the group size manageable. And then the other category that we are still interested in having a potentially more direct representation of is a representative of commercial building tenants. So I know that we have some tenants on this committee already, but we were hoping to potentially get maybe like an organization that represents multiple commercial building tenants, or maybe an organization that's a commercial building tenant across, maybe a suite of buildings, to provide a more direct connection to that representation. So if anybody has a recommendation there, we'd be happy to look at that.
Yeah, and I had made a nomination of folks, but they are just in one building, so that's why you weren't. Okay, gotcha.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you for your input, and maybe we'll still revisit that, but we were still hoping to kind of maybe get a broader representation of that tenant category. Yeah. Kevin.
Yeah, Kara's question. I forgot to mention that I'm the alternate to Nels Johnson, who couldn't make it today.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, thanks, Kevin. And we'll try to build out that alternate list as as folks kind of go along. Let's see. Next, Kathleen.
Yeah, just kind of maybe piggybacking off of Kara's questions. One, it looks like most folks are like Portland-ish area. Are there folks in like Southern, Eastern, Central Oregon? Do we have those perspectives present? And then I guess are there folks also that have experience from like maybe Washington or other building performance standards, like experience kind of going through that process would be good to have if we don't have those folks.
Yeah, great comments. Certainly if there's anybody that you have in mind that might feel like represent some of those. I know we do have some folks on the committee already that do represent like the statewide perspective, even if they're in, located in Portland. We have representation from like a couple smaller cities, smaller community-owned utilities, and I guess just other utilities that serve across the state, like Energy Trust and Portland. I guess the whole Portland General is specific to Portland, but certainly if there are any more rural considerations that we can add in there, but also kind of recognizing that building performance standards, most large buildings that will have to comply with the building performance standard are more likely to be located in larger, denser population areas. That's not to say that we don't want to consider any of the rural perspectives in this process too. So.
Yeah, maybe even just like the large cities in the other parts of the state.
Yeah.
I think just even like having folks located there, they're going to have a different perspective and actually understanding that community. So that's just something to consider. Maybe.
Noted. Thanks. Yeah, we'll take that. Let's see. So Wendy, I don't know if you had anything else to add about the fiscal impact and the work that the RAC will need to do with regard to that.
Briefly, I will just mention that when we file our paperwork for these rules, when we file draft rules and a notice that we plan to hold a public hearing and take public comments on these draft rules, one category is, for instance, the fiscal impact and also the cost of compliance. And there are some slightly more detailed questions about the expected cost to comply with the rules, including things like reporting, record keeping, and administrative activities, professional services, increased administration. If there are small businesses in particular that would be affected, or state agencies, local governments, members of the public. So we will be doing our best to answer those questions, kind of who are the folks and organizations that will be affected by the rules, and kind of what the committee's done to try to make that impact kind of minimize any potential adverse impacts.
Yeah, thanks, Wendy. So the other one area I wanted to highlight too in the draft charter, just in general, guidelines for our meetings. Please prepare for, set aside time for meetings. If there's any research or documentation that you want to bring toward the RAC, please provide it. Happy to provide that to the rest of the committee if it's sent to us. We're going to try our best definitely to stay focused on the specific topics for each meeting, and then just general. Please comment constructively, treat everybody with respect, allow one person to speak at a time, act courteously as we go through our process. We have right now in our draft schedule that I'll show here in a couple minutes, 7 specific meetings for the Rulemaking Advisory Committee that are set out, but I do want to talk about and get your input on our proposed schedule and how we plan to go about our work through the rest of the year. And then again, we are trying to, at this point, limit RAC meetings to RAC members and alternates only, with the plan for having broad stakeholder meetings that follow RAC meetings to cover anything that was discussed in the RAC meeting and bring that for broader stakeholder input. So I do ask, so everyone should be able to access the draft charter. Please get in there, review that, provide any comments and track changes by the end of next week, if that sounds reasonable, by March 1st. Are there any potential issues with providing that comments back by the end of next week? Kind of seeing general head nods that looks okay. So, and I'll send an email out after this just to Kara.
Yeah, sorry. Just 2 things I just put in the chat, that it looks like the version you sent out has us only meeting 4 times. So just not sure if there are other changes that have been made to versions.
Yeah, thanks for highlighting that. I did just change that. That was the only thing that I changed in between the two versions. And I had it highlighted before just because it was kind of a placeholder as I was putting together the schedule.
Gotcha.
I was hesitant to attach a version to an email, because it becomes static at that point. But now please reference the version on the SharePoint site rather. That'll be the live version that we update.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah, and then, apologies for not pointing that out.
Oh gosh, no. Just wanted to make sure there wasn't anything else that had been changed. And then I think the other thing is just, I've not served on an Odo RAC before. Is this pretty typical? Is there anything different about this charter for this RAC that maybe you could flag for us?
I will say it's my first rack to be on too, but I did use a couple of rack charters and other agency organization charters. There was one that I referenced from DEQ, who holds a lot of rulemaking advisory committees. Some of our other citing work and citing rulemaking advisory committees at our agency. So a lot of the language is pretty common across agency racks. And I tried to use that as much as possible. Yeah. Kathleen.
Yeah, I'm sorry if you mentioned this. Is it okay to share out like within our organization, like meeting notes from here and things that we discuss?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So just, yeah, request homework for the committee. Please review by March 1st. The draft charter. Now I'll talk a little bit about what our plans are. I'll make this larger. Yeah, there you go. Our plans for our BPS rule structure. So we plan to follow the same general structure as Standard 100. If you're familiar with Standard 100, it's organized into chapters and sections, and that is the general framework that we plan to use for our rulemaking chapters too. This is similar to the way that it was structured in Washington State. And we know moving forward that some of the chapters are going to be relatively straightforward and just administrative pieces and largely non-controversial, and others are going to be more involved and have a lot more discussion that we'll need to focus on. So we put together a draft. Oh, just here's I'll pull up the draft schedule next, but here's what the chapters in Standard 100 look like. There, it starts out just with the purpose, scope, definitions for energy management and building performance standards, compliance requirements, energy and emissions plans, operations and maintenance requirements, and these will essentially become our chapters of our rulemaking, all the way down to implementation and verification. And just as another example, this is the way that Washington structured their rules too. So we plan to do something very similar. So you'll notice that their rulemaking sections are a mirror of the chapters in ASHRAE Standard 100. So that's our plan too. Just one note that that Washington based there, because it was the current version, the available version at the time, the 2018 version of Standard 100. We are going to reference, because it just came out a month ago and it's available to us now, the 2024 version of the standard. The biggest difference in the 2024 version is that it now references emissions targets and has a greenhouse gas component to it also, although that won't necessarily be a consideration for us because our standards are directed by the statute to be based on site energy. So if you look at the 2024 version of Standard 100, you'll see all these greenhouse gas emissions related targets. Those won't be applicable for us. That's really the biggest change that came with the new version of the standard, but there are some other functional and administrative pieces that we'll want to look to rolling into the Oregon specific version of it. And I think it makes sense just to grab the most recent version of the standard since it's now available. So now I'll pull up what we're looking for the draft schedule review. Let's see. Get it. There it is. So the way that we are proposing to structure our meetings is to have a RAC meeting every month to cover certain chapters and certain sections of the rules. And then essentially take 2 months worth of RAC meetings. So each RAC meeting would be limited to RAC members only, and then take 2 months worth of RAC meeting input where we as an agency provide the RAC ahead of the meeting with our draft rules. We use the RAC as a focused working session to take comments, feedback, like look at the draft rule language, and then we'll revise as needed after those meetings and then roll up 2 months worth of RAC meetings and bring those out to the general public for a broad review. So where we've got these blue meetings for every month covering certain chapters, and this is all subject to change, and I'm certainly open to any input that the RAC has at this point on how we structure these, but to take like each individual chapter, look at those as a RAC, and then just for example, in May, we would take what the RAC covered in March and April and bring that to a broader public input session. And certainly RAC members are encouraged and able to attend the broader public input, but that's where we would look to, anybody and, any affected stakeholder that wants to provide input on our work. And then we take that back and revise it as needed based on the broad public input and repeat that cycle 3 different times, ultimately toward providing our integrated complete rule draft by the end of September, filing that by the end of September, and then that becomes just the standard state agency formal public rulemaking process where we file our rules with the Secretary of State, our draft rules, leave it open for a month for public comment on the entire package of rules, hold the public rulemaking hearing in early November, and then file our rules by the end of the year. So it's all kind of working back from that December 31st file the rules deadline that's in statute and the work that we need to do to get there by that time. So this kind of has our RAC activity finishing up by the end of August so that we can have that final broad public meeting in September, take comments back, file the rules, another month of public input as part of the formal rulemaking process. So hopefully this kind of makes sense. If there's any questions or comments or feedback, happy to. Kara, yeah.
You're going to be sorry you had me on this RAC. I'm a very active RAC participant.
Not sorry at all. That's great.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just am thinking about how a lot of the DEQ RACs operate so that RAC members are talking to each other and they're the only ones with cameras on and have the only ability to talk, but then the general public can watch. I don't know that there will be much appetite for this particular RAC, but I could see potentially there being folks who have expertise who, of course, people who have expertise who aren't on the RAC, who may have a lot to offer and may benefit from watching the RAC operate. So yeah, I guess just wondering how other folks feel about the sort of the hybrid nature of this, where we have private RAC meetings and then it sounds like you'll go to the public, present sort of what we've done so far. They won't actually watch the RAC operate. You'll then bring feedback back to us. I guess I just wondered if we could have a discussion about whether that makes the most sense or if you're pretty sold on that way of proceeding.
Yeah, thanks. I think we did consider, a few different methods for doing this, whether or not we have, we know there's an option for like RAC meetings open to the public with public input, maybe at the end, maybe kind of hybrid meetings where we have the RAC meet for an hour and then the public directly after that. The way that we were envisioning it was that the RAC meetings are more focused, interactive working sessions where there's a lot of back and forth, kind of working through the issues. And then the public meetings are mostly listening sessions where we take comments and then go back and revise afterward. But, I'll say that we're definitely not sold on any particular method. This was the one that kind of made the most sense to us as we're thinking about it, but definitely want to hear the input from the rest of the committee members on how we move forward. Yeah. I thought I saw maybe another hand raised a minute ago, but maybe I don't see it now. So if there's any more comments, if folks are generally okay with this or want to talk any more about the way that we structure it, I think we're open. We're certainly open to having a different method if that's the way the RAC wants to proceed. Kevin.
Yeah, is the moment for that feedback now, or is that part of the charter review?
I'd say both. Yeah, I'd say if we want to have any group discussion now, but I did build that kind of framework into the charter. So if you have comments, feel free to bring it up now and then make the associated changes to the charter too, or comments in the charter. Yeah.
I was just going to say, it seems like what you've structured here makes sense, having that flow of work session, public review, back and forth. That I like what you're proposing here.
Thanks for the feedback. Okay, well, certainly if you need a chance to kind of like think about and digest the plan for the rest of the year and provide any feedback through the either directly to us or through the comments in the charter, please do so. So the next couple slides are kind of what we were just chatting about, for discussion with the RAC, how we structure these meetings, whether or not, so we know that we want to have like primary and alternate representatives and, one member from each representation attend the meetings. Whether or not we want to have RAC only meetings or RAC plus public meetings, how we kind of phase these. And then one other thing that we also know that we may need to kind of think about as we go forward is we might have a particular topic that gets really in depth and in the weeds that we know that maybe there's like 3 or 4 RAC members that are really engaged and invested in, and the others don't necessarily have a big opinion on it. So what we might want to do is, as those get identified, and we don't really have those identified yet, but I think they'll kind of identify themselves as we get to working through some of these topics. We might want to have like separate working groups or separate subgroups that really dig deep into a certain topic and then come back to the full RAC with the output. So that's one thing that we'll look to. And with that kind of brings us to the end of the meeting. Just wrap up, general opportunity for more questions, discussion, comments, concerns, additional considerations for us as we go through the process and plan our work through the year. I appreciate all the good questions today so far, and yeah, Clark.
Yeah, first I can see that there's going to be at least 1 month where I have a conflict and I don't yet have a second, but it's okay for me to find a second and then work with you on that so that, and I will keep them apprised, but it's, we don't have to have that done already, right? I can work on it.
No, and that can be done if you note that you're going to have a conflict like a week ahead of time and want to send somebody else in your place. That's totally fine.
Okay, and then I have a totally different related question. I mean, an unrelated question to that, which is with the new ASHRAE standard, including GHG emissions, and I know we're not supposed to incorporate that here. Will there be any aspect to what we're doing that's forward-looking to, say, 2029, 2030, where the whole program has now run its course, one cycle for everyone? Because I imagine by 2030, ASHRAE standard 100 with GHG emissions will have a lot more standing, for lack of a better word. Does it make sense for us to have a bike rack or something for ideas for version 2 of the BPS, or are you going to keep us solely focused on version 1?
I think just for the purposes of like efficiency and meeting our requirements by the end of the year, I think we'll almost have to stay focused on our work for this year for like the first phase. Just knowing that the next, because in 5 years we're directed to do another rulemaking, right?
Okay.
So it'll essentially be this same process again, with another, or hopefully all the a lot of the same folks on the on the committee. So no, because I think for this first time it'll mainly be focused on meeting our charge for this year, knowing that we'll repeat the process again in a few years. So,
right. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
I have a quick question for you. This is Eddie.
Oh, yeah, Eddie. Okay.
Really quick. With the focus being the financial impact is one of our focuses on small businesses. Who will be providing us with the data that's going to be required for us to lend in some information to? Because I think that's going to be a major piece that we have to play into is how are we going to give any information, and then who's providing that to us?
Yeah, Wendy, I don't know if you have any input here too, but I think a lot of the data and the input will come from the stakeholders. So, I think one of the main purposes of a rulemaking advisory committee is that the RAC kind of provides a broad microcosm of representation of the affected stakeholders from potential rules. And certainly if there's any data that comes from broader stakeholders too, we'll look to that. But it's not part of our rulemaking to engage with a third party to provide data to look at this. The data that, or any information that comes in to inform that, I think will come from either from the RAC or from other stakeholder involvement.
Thank you.
Yeah. Vin. Oh, Wendy, sorry. Did you have anything else to add?
I think I think you're correct. We're not required to, conduct a whole detailed study, but we definitely want to get input from this group, and if there's readily available information that we're able to get to quantify, what are the number of businesses that are affected, and our best estimate of how many of those are small businesses, and our best estimate of how much time and a cost that they could go to comply with the building performance standard. So it's the best of our knowledge, and we'll definitely look for getting input from the members of the RAC on that.
Yeah, thanks, Wendy. Vin.
Oh, thanks. I was wondering if you could share the schedule, and I can't quite read the content very well.
Oh, yeah.
Are there meeting dates already determined, like our next meeting dates and times, or is that something we'll be doing along the way?
Yeah, thanks. Good question. I did put the schedule up on the SharePoint site if anyone wants to look at it, but there are not any specific dates yet, mainly because we wanted to get a general consensus head nod that the framework was okay. But what we'd like to do, like assuming that it looks fine, that we want to go with this kind of RAC then public meeting structure, that we get the dates kind of set through August, so that we can all get them on our calendars and plan for them and know when we can attend or when we might need to find an alternate. So the only date that I will say that is on the calendar now, we haven't sent this out yet, but we're actually working with through our grant work with Earth Advantage and the other partners, is to have a general public meeting on March 21st, and that's on this schedule here too. But that one won't cover any substantive like rule language itself. It'll be kind of an introduction to ASHRAE Standard 100, introduction to building performance standards. In general, we're looking with working with Earth Advantage and NBI to help provide some of that information, New Buildings Institute. And I would certainly encourage any RAC members to attend that broad public meeting also, as we engage in our work. So. But yeah, what I want to do is get our specific dates kind of laid out so we can get them on the calendar and make them known so that everyone can plan. Kara.
Yeah, just a question about formality of feedback. Are we talking about just emails to you and Wendy, or is there a different way that you'd like to have feedback presented in writing?
Yeah, can you clarify like on which topics or on anything?
I'm just
in general?
about,
yeah,
just starting with the charter and then maybe like anticipated in the future how you'd like the feedback provided. I mean, obviously in meetings, but then written feedback.
I'd say I'd like to try to use the common documents on SharePoint, just so that comments are visible to the rest of the RAC. So if you have comments on the charter, make those and track changes. As we start posting the draft rules, make those also within the document itself, so that we have one common record that we can look to and use that for our committee's work. And that way, the rest of the RAC members can see the work too, and I'll be aware of what others' concerns are. And we are planning to, for general public comments, we'll be setting up like a database, a platform, so that folks can comment on specific sections of the rules, and we can group and filter those. So more than just emails to Wendy and I, because that could be difficult to manage. So. Okay, I guess we have 5 minutes left. Happy to chat about anything else, or let folks go 5 minutes early if there's nothing else to talk about. Eddie.
Yeah, I will be able to provide lots of data and information on costs of lighting projects and things that'll bring things to current standards. But can I do those generally without giving customer names? Is that something that would be acceptable to you guys? Or do I need to provide this is the commercial customer and this is the financial impact that they would have?
I think I think any anonymized data would be fine. If it helps inform the process. Yeah, we might want to but if there's a way to filter it for like specifically for like applicable buildings, right? Like only buildings that are subject to the standards. Yeah, I don't know that we need to know who owns the building or like whose project it was, but for this purpose.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Well, again, thank you to everybody on the committee for volunteering your time as we go through this process, recognizing that it's going to be somewhat time intensive, but we're super grateful for all the expertise and perspectives that are offered on this committee, and I'm excited to work with everybody. So, thanks a lot. Look forward to. We'll probably send out a doodle poll to get maybe plans for like the next immediate meeting, and then just look to hopefully folks' calendars are pretty clear, 3 or 4 months out, where we can just get some meetings and set those and claim that time. So, but all right, thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Blake.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Blake.
Bye.
Thank you.